My own mother convinced my fiancé to marry my brother instead of me. Worse still, I did not find out until the day before our wedding. But little did I know that down the line, fate had in its own twisted sense of humor some other plans for my brother and soon-to-be wife. The day began with such promise, sunlight streaming through my window like a warm embrace. I was adjusting a bow tie in the mirror, practicing my vows, something about eternity and never letting go. The doorbell rang and I bounded down the stairs, expecting to find Kate with her usual mischievous grin, but instead there stood my mother, twisting the strap of her purse like a tourniquet. "Can we talk?" she said. We sat in the living room. She hesitated, as if savoring the moment before a performance. "It's about Kate," she said finally. "She's not coming tomorrow." My mind reeled. Not coming? I waited for the punchline, but instead she offered an envelope. Inside was a letter from Kate. "Dear Evan," it began, "I need you to understand." Understand what? My eyes ping-ponged across words like complicated and never meant to hurt you. My brother's name appeared more frequently than my own. "Adam and I," the letter continued, weaving a tapestry of betrayal I couldn't untangle. Each line was a dagger, each sentence a calculated twist. "I don't believe this," I said, the room warping like a bad dream. "She loves him," my mother said with an unsettling calm, as if that made it okay, as if love were some wild animal that couldn't be tamed or questioned. "This is for the best," she added. "Best for whom?" I stood up, anger surging through me like a current. "For everyone," she replied, her voice maddeningly gentle. The betrayal tasted metallic on my tongue. My brother, my own flesh and blood, how long had they been plotting this? How long had I been the punchline to their cruel joke? My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away, backing toward the door as if escape might salvage some shred of sanity. Her eyes followed me with an infuriating mixture of pity and resolve. I drove aimlessly, the letter crumpled in my fist like a dying animal. The words haunted me, each one an echo of Kate's voice, sweet and insistent. "It just happened," she'd written, as if love were a slip on the ice or a sudden summer storm. How had I missed this? The signs must have been neon bright for everyone but me. Memories morphed grotesquely, Kate laughing at Adam's jokes, their inside glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Finally, I pulled over by the river where we'd spent lazy summers as kids. I sat on the hood of my car, watching the water rush past with an urgency that matched the chaos in my head. When my phone buzzed, I didn't need to look to know who it was. But there it flashed. Adam. "Can we talk?" read the message. What could he possibly say? The river gurgled relentlessly, indifferent to my turmoil. I flung a pebble into the current, watching it disappear. My phone buzzed again, Adam's insistence like a mosquito I couldn't swat away. "Please." I imagined him waiting for a response, maybe pacing, maybe smug in the knowledge that he'd won. The thought made my skin itch, every part of me wanted to ignore him. But curiosity, or masochism, got the better of me. "Meet me at the old dock," I typed back, and hit send before logic could intervene. When he arrived, he wore the expression of someone stepping onto thin ice, cautious but determined. His disheveled hair and wrinkled shirt suggested a restless night, but it was hard to summon any sympathy. "Evan," he started, but I held up a hand. "I don't want to hear excuses," I said. "How long?" He sighed, shoving his hands into his pockets like a guilty child. "It just happened," he mumbled, parroting Kate's letter. "How long?" I repeated, each word heavy with accusation. Since the engagement party," he admitted, his eyes darting anywhere but at me. The engagement party. Nearly a year ago. My mind flashed to the two of them huddled in a corner, their laughter like a private language. I'd been so busy playing the gracious host that I hadn't seen what was right in front of me. "You should have told me," I said, my voice ragged with betrayal. He looked up, pain etched into his features. "I tried. Evan, I'm sorry," he said, stepping closer. "I never wanted to hurt you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You've got a funny way of showing it." "Can you do me a favor? Why don't you, Kate and Mom, go ahead and inform the guests there's no wedding? Cancel the caterers and the venue, huh? Or maybe you could just go ahead and marry her yourself since everything's already arranged," I exclaimed, feeling a lump forming in my throat. It was the way he looked at me then that made me realize there was more to this, something Kate's letter hadn't mentioned. Probably the reason he wanted to talk. Then, he gave it to me as bluntly as Kate had in her letter. The two idiots had planned their own wedding. Oh my God! I wished the ground would just open up and swallow me whole. Was this really my brother standing before me, or was I dreaming? I needed a strong drink, but that could wait. What the hell, Adam? You're going to marry my fiancée at my own wedding? I shouted in disbelief, the words nearly choking me as they came out. No, we wouldn't, he replied, as if suddenly there were lines he wouldn't cross. We have our own thing planned 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks? You couldn't even wait for me to lick my wounds? Does Mom know about this? I asked. He hesitated, and that was answer enough. A mix of rage and disbelief coursed through me. The world spun absurdly, like a grotesque merry-go-round I couldn't get off. You've got this all figured out, huh? I said, my voice cracking under the weight of my anger. Evan, please, Adam implored, taking another step closer. I want you to be there. Be there? I nearly shouted, incredulous. You can't be serious. His face was a map of desperation and hope, as if he believed that by some miracle I'd offer my blessing. Just think about it, he said quietly, backing away as if retreat might soften the blow he just delivered. I watched him leave, his silhouette dissolving into the distance like a bad dream at dawn. Alone again, I stared at the river. My reflection wavered on its surface, unsteady, fragmented. At that moment, I had only 2 things on my mind, a bottle of whiskey and a woman to help numb the pain. Don't judge. I drove aimlessly across town until I finally pulled up at a bar. The place was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from neon beer signs and flickering wall sconces. The smell of spilled beer, cigarettes, and the sharp bite of whiskey lingered in the air. It was exactly what I needed. Nobody knew me here. Nobody cared. Just me and my misery, having a pity party. I could drown in oblivion, if only for the night. I ordered a whiskey on the rocks, the smooth burn coating my throat with a familiar warmth. The bitterness of the drink mingled with the bitterness in my own heart. Keep them coming, I called to the waiter. As she turned to leave, my gaze lingered on her ass, out of reflex, and in that moment, an unexpected lightness, freedom bloomed in my chest. It settled like a trespasser, carving space in the hollow where betrayal festered. The next drink came quickly, followed by another. With each one, the world blurred further out of focus, and I welcomed the numbness. The waitress moved down the bar to where I sat, raising an eyebrow at my empty glass. Rough night? She asked, her voice cutting through the fog in my head. I let out a hollow laugh. That's one way to put it. Let me guess, she said, pouring another without waiting for my order. Girl trouble. Bingo, I replied, lifting the glass in a mock toast before taking a long gulp. She leaned against the bar, studying me with an intensity that made me squirm. Want to talk about it? Not really, I said, suggesting that I didn't want to talk, but was open to other forms of consolation if that's what she was offering. The subtext hung between us, thick and undeniable. Her scrutiny made me feel more naked. She didn't press me for details. Instead, she smirked, wiping down the counter in slow, deliberate movements. My shift ends at midnight, she said. I held her gaze, a challenge, an invitation. I downed the rest of my drink and signaled for another, the warmth in my chest spreading, dulling the ache in my ribs. The hours blurred past in a haze of alcohol and fleeting conversation. I let her work, watching as she moved through the bar with a practiced ease, serving drinks, dodging wandering hands, flashing an occasional knowing glance my way. The anticipation settled in my gut, a welcome distraction from the storm still raging in my mind. When the clock finally struck 12, she untied her apron and tossed it behind the counter. Let's go, she said, and I followed her out into the night. The air was crisp, the neon lights of the bar flickering behind us. We took an Uber to my apartment. She pressed me against the door as soon as it clicked shut, her lips crashing against mine with a hunger that left no room for words. For a while, I let myself drown in her, in the scent of cheap perfume and whiskey on her breath, in the way her fingers clawed at my shirt, desperate and insistent. I wondered how often she does this with her customers. There was no love here, no tenderness, only need, and that suited me just fine. The night unraveled in tangled sheets and whispered sighs and fleeting touches that made me forget, if only for a little while. I chased oblivion in her skin, in the heat between us, losing myself in her. The nut felt pretty good, I gotta say. The sound of running water and sunlight streaming through the window pulled me from sleep. I squinted at the alarm clock on the nightstand, 9:30 a.m. Fragments of the night before flickered through my mind, whiskey, laughter, tangled sheets. Instinctively, I reached for my phone. Nearly 40 missed calls, 15 from Kate. The rest were just a sea of chaos from the abruptly canceled wedding. A voice interrupted my thoughts. "My name is Sally, by the way." The girl from the bar stepped out of the shower, her figure momentarily distracting me from my spiraling thoughts. "Evan," I said, offering my name. For a second, I considered pulling her back into bed, losing myself in her world a little longer. But then the doorbell rang. Loud, urgent, annoying. I sighed, ran a hand through my hair, and made my way downstairs. As I swung the door open, well, there she was. The devil herself. "Kate." "Evan, I've been calling you all morning. What's wrong with your phone?" Seeing her standing there reignited the betrayal souring in my chest. There was so much I could say, so many questions I could ask, but then I remembered her stupid breakup letter, delivered by my cold-hearted mother, the day before our wedding. And suddenly I settled on a simple fact. She wasn't worth it. "What do you want, Kate?" I asked, my voice flat. "What do I want?" she echoed, exasperated. "Haven't you read any of my messages?" The caterer and the venue manager reached out last night. They said they can't do last-minute cancellations. We have to pay the full cost by this evening. I scoffed. "Are you kidding me right now? You want me to pay for a wedding you canceled after sleeping with my brother?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already shaking my head in disbelief. "You know what? Here's an idea. Why don't you marry Adam instead? Huh? Put the venue to good use." I realized I was yelling. Movement from the staircase caught my eye. Sally, wrapped in a towel, stood watching the chaos unfold. Kate's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell is that?" I chuckled at the irony. The nerve. "You couldn't wait to sleep around, huh?" she spat, her voice dripping with accusation. Now she was really getting on my nerves. Not only was she embarrassing me in front of my guest, but she was also acting like she had any right to be angry. I exhaled sharply. "Get out of my life, Kate. You could get hit by a bus for all I care." I grabbed her arm, led her outside, and slammed the door shut. Little did I know, fate had its own plans for Kate. And yes, they literally involved a bus. But we'll get to that. If you're enjoying my story so far, consider subscribing to my channel for daily stories like this. I turned to Sally, who had now made her way into the living room. "Sorry about that," she smirked. "Did I hear that right? You were supposed to be getting married today?" "Well," I said, matching her playful tone and switching off my phone, "you could say my day just opened up." I spent the day with Sally, losing myself before I had to phase the storm that was my life, apparently. We took a road trip out of town, laughing, drinking beers, and screwing in the back seat. Not a bad alternative to a wedding, I must admit. 2 weeks is a short time when your fiancé is about to marry your brother. Their wedding day was approaching fast. I buried myself with work during the day, drowning in whiskey and losing myself in Sally's company at night. It was a reckless, numbing cycle, one I welcomed. I ignored the countless calls from my mother and Adam, but I kept myself updated on the wedding plans through Kate's Instagram stories. I don't know why I cared, and I had to admit it was glamorous. The floral arrangements, the dress fittings, the lavish rehearsal dinners, it was everything she had once planned with me, now unfolding with my brother. But the real gut punch came when I learned the full extent of the betrayal. My mother hadn't just known about Kate and Adam's affair, she had encouraged it. It was her idea for Kate to marry Adam instead of me. Apparently, I was a pathetic loser who would end up disappointing her forever. And as if that weren't enough, she was the one bankrolling their wedding. I spent hours wondering what I had done to that woman to make her resent me so much. Was I not the son she wanted? Was there something inherently unworthy about me in her eyes? But a self-help podcast I had been listening to put things into perspective. Some people are just diabolical, and their cruelty has nothing to do with you. That realization, along with Sally's warmth, was what kept me going. And then, just days before the wedding, something completely unexpected happened. Do you remember when I told Kate she could get hit by a bus for all I cared? I'm no sorcerer, but that actually happened. I was indulging in my new evening routine with Sally when the news came in the form of a text from Adam. Kate is dead. At first, I thought I had misread, or maybe this was some twisted prank, a desperate attempt to make me return his messages, to force me to pick up the phone. But then, another message came through, this time from Kate's sister Emily. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced as I dialed Emily's number. Kate had been in a hit-and-run accident that evening after leaving her yoga class. Witnesses said a speeding black Chevrolet had struck her, killing her on the spot. The driver never stopped. I didn't know how to feel. How was I supposed to feel? This was the woman I had planned to spend my life with, the same woman who had torn my heart out and stomped on it without a second thought. I had spent weeks drowning in the bitterness of her betrayal, and now she was just gone. A part of me expected relief, but it never came. Instead, I felt a strange, unsettling emptiness. And then there was Adam. For all the hatred I harbored toward him, for all the ways he had wronged me, I couldn't ignore the simple, brutal truth. His fiancée was now lying in a cold morgue, lifeless. The woman he had chosen over me, the future he had stolen, was now reduced to nothing but grief. I stared at my phone for a long time before finally typing out a message. "Yeah, I've heard. I'm sorry, man. I wasn't sure if I meant it, but I sent it anyway." Sally was still beside me, half-dressed, her fingers tracing absent-minded circles on my arm. She noticed the shift in my expression before I even said a word. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. I stared at my phone. "Kate's dead." Her hand stilled. "What?" "Hit and run. Some car ran her over. She died on the spot." My own words felt foreign, like I was reading off some bad script. For a long moment, Sally just looked at me. I expected her to say something, anything, but instead she climbed off my lap, grabbed her shirt, and pulled it over her head. "You should go," she said finally. I blinked. "What?" "You need to be there," she clarified. "With your family. With," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "with the people who knew her." I almost laughed. My family? The same people who had thrown me aside like I was nothing? The same people who had spent the past 2 weeks planning a wedding for my brother and my ex-fiancée? But something inside me whispered that Sally was right. I drove to my mother's house, my stomach in knots the entire way. The moment I stepped inside, I was greeted by hushed voices and the smell of expensive candles. The air was suffocating. Adam was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, his hands buried in his hair. He didn't even look up when I entered. My mother, however, did. She stood by the fireplace, wineglass in hand, because, of course, even in mourning, she wouldn't let go of her aristocratic habits. Her face was a careful mask, but her eyes held something new, something I wasn't expecting. Doubt. "How did you know she was dead?" she asked, her voice smooth, too controlled. I frowned. "Adam texted me." Her eyes flicked to Adam, but he still wasn't looking up. He was staring at the floor, his entire body locked in silent tension. Then she turned back to me. "She told us about your last conversation." I tensed. "What?" "About how you told her she could go get hit by a bus," she said, swirling her wine in the glass. "Interesting choice of words, don't you think?" A chill ran through me. "You think I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You think I killed her?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked toward me, heels clicking against the marble floor, stopping just close enough for me to feel the weight of her scrutiny. "You were angry," she murmured. "Drinking, sleeping around, ignoring your responsibilities. You disappeared for days. No one knew where you were." I clenched my fists. "Are you even hearing yourself right now?" She tilted her head. "You wanted revenge, and now she's dead. Don't you think the timing is convenient?" A sharp laugh left my throat, hollow and bitter. "I didn't kill her," I said, my voice low. "But you know what's funny? Even if I had, I still wouldn't be the worst person in this room." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Watch yourself, Evan." I turned to Adam then, finally making eye contact. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed red, but his jaw was locked tight, anger and guilt battling for control. "You don't actually believe this, do you?" I asked him. He looked at me, silent. I didn't know if it was from the grief or whether he actually believed my mother's preposterous accusation. Either way, I didn't need their bad vibes, and I realized that coming there was a bad idea. I left as soon as I had arrived and went home. That night, I had a nightmare. Kate was lying in the middle of the street. her broken body bathed in the glow of streetlights, whispering my name. I woke up drenched in sweat, feeling like something inside me had rotted. As if breaking my heart was not enough, bitch was haunting me now. I drugged myself out of bed to go get a whiskey in the kitchen. The funeral came faster than I had expected. I wasn't going to go, but Sally insisted. "You need to see this through," she said, adjusting her dress in the mirror. "Besides, if you don't show up, they'll think you're hiding something." So I went. It was a cold, overcast day, as if even the sky couldn't bring itself to be indifferent. The funeral was extravagant, just as I expected. My mother had spared no expense, ensuring the entire event was a grand display of mourning. White roses lined the pathway leading to the church. A massive portrait of Kate stood at the entrance, her smiling face a cruel contrast to the reality of what had happened. I walked in with Sally, my hand resting loosely at her waist. The stares were immediate. Some whispered, others just gawked. I felt them analyzing me, searching for signs of grief, of guilt, of something that wasn't just blank indifference. Adam sat in the front row, his shoulders slumped, his face a wreck of exhaustion and heartbreak. My mother was beside him, her veil lowered, her hand resting on his knee as if anchoring him to the ground. She turned when she saw me, her expression unreadable. I took a seat in the back. I wasn't here to mourn. I had done that in my own way. I was here to witness the end of something, to see with my own eyes that Kate was truly gone. After the burial, as the mourners dispersed, Adam found me. He wasn't crying anymore. He was shaking, his fists clenched at his sides like he was holding himself back from swinging at me. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he spat, his voice low and venomous. I raised a brow. "Enjoying what?" "This." He gestured wildly, his composure breaking, watching me suffer, seeing her buried, knowing she's gone. I tilted my head, considering his words. Then I shrugged. "I'm not happy, Adam, but I'm not sorry either." His breath hitched. "You son of a—" He lunged, his fist flying toward my face, but someone grabbed his arm before he could connect. My mother. She was gripping him tightly, whispering something in his ear. His shoulders heaved, but he stopped, his eyes filled with nothing but pure loathing. I met his glare head-on, unflinching. "You made your choice, Adam? Don't be mad at me for not pretending to be the better man." He stepped back, shaking his head in disgust before storming off. Sally and I left the funeral without another word. The ride was quiet for a while. I stared out the window, watching the trees blur past, feeling a strange sense of finality settle over me. I had no love left for Kate, no anger, no sadness, just emptiness. She was gone, and that was that. Sally reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. "I need to tell you something." I glanced at her. "What is it?" She hesitated, then exhaled, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a sudden gust of wind, knocking the breath from my lungs. Pregnant, a laugh bubbled in my chest, unexpected and raw. "You're serious?" She nodded. "I found out yesterday. I was going to wait, but I figured you should know now." For the first time in weeks, I felt something real, something warm, something that wasn't tied to the past. I squeezed her hand. "Then let's get the hell out of here." And with that, we drove on, leaving ghosts and graveyards behind. For good. If you liked this video, subscribe for daily videos like this.